Hello and welcome to Too Many Movies, the podcast where we discuss DVDs, Blu-rays, and even the occasional VHS tape. I'm your host, Hal, and with me here today, Daniel. Introduce yourself.
Hey everybody, I'm Daniel Goldhorn with the YouTube channel Daniel Goldhorn, and I also like to talk about movies, everything from animated, like recent animated stuff to obscure, well, relatively obscure Guillermo del Toro movies that are my favorite movies that no one else has ever heard of, apparently.
You've heard of Guillermo del Toro too? Wow.
You'd be surprised. I work a front-facing job. I'll be like, hey, make small talk. What do you think of this guy? And yeah.
Yeah. No, you know what? That's true. There's a difference between being obscure in real life and obscure on the internet. I think when you're on the internet and you mention something that you think is obscure and then you find out like 700 other people know about it. But then if you go out into the real world and you're just like, hey, this movie, and they're like, what the fuck is this? And it's like, oh, okay. Yeah, no, there's different levels of obscurity. No, I totally get that. Well, hey, animated films. We're talking about an animated film today. Wow, boy, howdy. How about that? So, Daniel, when you wanted to come on the show, you had suggested a couple of things, but eventually we boiled it down to one particular movie. So you know what? I'm going to let you introduce it since you were very keen to talk about this film. So please.
Yeah, I've been really kind of like studying this film, actually. I put together a video about this on my channel, actually, a couple months ago. And that video was a culmination of, I'm not even exaggerating, like 2 years of effort trying to pull together my discussion about Grave of the Fireflies, the 1988 anime film. And I have to specify that because there's actually a live action adaptation of it.
Is there really?
There is, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Oh.
Shit.
Yeah.
See, when we were talking about like, what we were gonna discuss, I was just like, yeah, I just want to talk about the actual movie. Like, if you want to come up with like outside or information about the film, by all means. Yeah, I literally did no research for this. Wow, there's a live action Grave of the Fireflies. Okay.
Yeah, there is. And that's because like this movie has so much behind it, like because obviously if you just see it on its own, like on its surface, it's already a devastating work of art.
Yes.
But once you dig into the background of it, like the original story is based on the true story that story was based on, it becomes like 10 times more impactful.
Yeah, so I did watch your video, and I gotta say, not to stroke your ego a little there, but it was very well done video. But no, and I definitely came away from your video definitely appreciating the film more. Not to say that I didn't appreciate it beforehand, but I definitely do feel like I understand it a little more, like what it was going for. Now that I've seen your video, which we will link it in the description, obviously. I think a lot of people should see it because it's very informative. It's more than just a review of the film. Like you actually go in depth with the history of everything involved with it, I would say.
Yeah, and in a way that's one of the things that I've been kind of pivoting towards with my videos as well, just like trying to talk about not just the movies but also some like the context behind them, like the history behind them or how they get made. Because that can be so illuminating, like not just the text, but the context around it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, no. And I think that's very important when it comes to, actually analyzing film. The way I try to analyze film is just, I like to just see what I've been given, like what is actually there, just to see like, okay, because not everybody can, actually delve into a film's history. Not everybody has the time or the ability even to research. No, and I think what you do is great. Like, and honestly, I think more people should be like that. It's just that when it comes to me personally, I mean, I do love doing deep dives myself, but sometimes it is also important to see like what's been presented. And I feel like I feel like both are equally as valid, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I like that you kind of look at the work in itself, because when you look at the context, then you can be like, oh, it kind of guides you towards like certain interpretations, and it's always interesting to see when you appreciate just the work itself, what you take away from that.
Yeah, and I do feel like some people might even get lost in like what they're even talking about if they try to like tackle so much in a video. Obviously, this is like, videos or like just analyzing something, just in a way that I feel like you could possibly get lost, that you're just like, okay, where did this all start with? Like, it was just watching a film, like I try to start simply, and if I see any reason to go beyond that, then I'll pursue it,
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's just like there's so many interesting ways to approach this, especially like with something like this.
Yes, absolutely.
With Grave of the Fireflies, it is just a very, and honestly, a lot of Isao Takahata's work, there's just so much, like, if you take at the surface value level, you can get so much, and then you just dig in, and it's just, it's so good. I'll go on a whole Isao Takahata tangent later on.
Well, we've talked about a Takahata film on the podcast before. Me and Olivia, we talked about Princess Kaguya. Oh
my god, yes.
I'm just going to get out of the way. I do think that's my favorite from Takahata. I would assume a lot of people would probably consider this his best or something like that. I do think this is definitely up there as one of his best, but I definitely prefer something like Kaguya more so. And again, that's a personal thing. Like, I think when it comes to this movie specifically, I'm very much a part of the group of people that considers it good. Absolutely. But I definitely wouldn't say I'm part of the group. I'm definitely not there with like someone like you or other people where they think this is like one of the best Ghibli has ever done, or like it's like a perfect film for them. Like, I don't think I'm quite there, but I do appreciate it, like, and again, after watching your video, I was like, yeah, no, I can definitely see the strengths of this movie. I think it is a very good film, and definitely one that I think a lot more people should not only just watch, but appreciate, especially in this we're living in an era of animation as cinema, like people throw that phrase a lot nowadays. And I feel like it's movies like these that phrase should be attributed to more,
Absolutely. And real quickly, I will say, because I actually kind of agree with it, that The Tale of the Princess Kaguya is not only like Takahata's best work, actually, like, because there's like, obviously I really, really, like and appreciate Grave of the Fireflies, but Tale of the Princess Kaguya is magic. It is just like, it's honestly my favorite animated film ever. Like, that one is, so like that one is so good. But coming back to this though, looking at Takahata's work actually, and this is something that I actually was very, because kind of digging into Isao Takahata and how he approached this movie and everything, I found that he wasn't just a great artist, he was a great intellectual too. Like, he was incredibly brilliant on all sorts of different topics. And one of the things I just so appreciate about him is because he passed away in 2015, the ripe old age of 82, and he was still taken from us far too soon. As you look at this, Princess Kaguya that we mentioned, Only Yesterday, which is just like this very slice of life adult drama. And because you look at you look at Pixar movies, and obviously those will have elements in them that are accessible for adults. They target more mature audiences, but at the same time, they still feel like they're also meant to be accessible for kids too. It's like they're very much family movies where anybody of any age can enjoy them.
Right.
Whereas Takahata feels like he specifically makes movies for like teenagers or adults.
I could definitely see that. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
And again, this isn't like any kind of like shade towards like Pixar or anything like that. Obviously, like no, they have a great collection of work under the belts.
Different strokes for different folks, of course.
Exactly, and I feel like Takahata, he really took animation as like, this is something that I want, young adults to appreciate more. Like, again, Only Yesterday is very much kind of like a grown-up drama. Like, I don't see like a kid could really connect with that as much, but it is just sublime.
Well, it's interesting that talking about Takahata, because I do want to mention something, I guess, to talk specifically about this film, Grave of the Fireflies. In your video, you had mentioned that Takahata famously said he didn't want Grave of the Fireflies to be like an anti-war film in the context of what anti-war films were at the time, where like, it's something that is very much against the idea of war, but it still is trying to glorify war. And I feel like I thought that was a really good point, because like, thinking about it, yeah, no, this is a film that doesn't glorify anything. Like, it is very much showing the horrors of war, not necessarily from like a soldier's perspective, but from the perspective of, well, the people who get affected from like the terrible, terrible things that happen through war. Just normal, everyday people.
Exactly, and that's a very, that I feel like, when I read that, I was kind of surprised, because when I first saw this movie, I was like, oh, it has an anti-war message to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's really interesting, though, is that the movie, because obviously war is a big element in this film. It takes place at the end of the Pacific War. It takes place, the inciting incident essentially is the firebombing of Kobe and the loss of both Seita and Setsuko's, their mother and their house.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what kind of gets everything going. And we see another air raid later in the movie, but most of the movie focuses on how Seita and Setsuko are treated by the people around them.
Yes, very much so.
And actually, real quickly, because I think we're going to start digging more into like the actual content of the movie here.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just kind of get like a little blurb of kind of the context that I dug into. So this movie is based on a short story written by Akiyuki Nosaka. When Nosaka was a teenager, he was living, again, at the end of the Pacific War. That's World War II. And he also lost his home in firebombing. He lost his father, and his mother was hospitalized. And he and his infant sister, Keiko, they went to live with a relative nearby, and things are very terrible there. And the thing is that, because I guess it's not really spoilers, because the movie opens with this. Mm-hmm. Seita and Setsuko both die by the end of the story. And obviously Akiyuki Nosaka himself didn't die, but he was kind of plagued by guilt because he didn't really take good care of his sister. Mm-hmm. It's something he made later in life, and that guilt haunted him so much. And later on in his story, later on in his life, he opened up about this story about his experiences, and he wrote Seita in the original short story, translated as A Grave for Fireflies. He wrote Seita to take much better care of his sister and to die with her.
Right.
And that's so that's like the real life version of what happened here, and it kind of makes things interesting to see what's different, what's the same.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like as we go through the movie, again, they go live with their aunt. And at first she's like, oh, it's, take you in. But over time, she kind of like the hospitality really starts to rub away.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. That aunt character, What's interesting is that I was ready to like, because the first time I watched this movie, I remember just being like, "Oh, what a bitch." And upon the second rewatch, I definitely still felt that, but it's not like I didn't understand where she was coming from. I think that's what the movie does brilliantly, is that, this aunt character is very much, she's a bit of an antagonist, but she's not a straight up villain, Like, you are frustrated by her mindset, but at the same time, it's not like the movie doesn't at least show you why she thinks that way. Whether or not you agree with her, at least you understand where she's coming from. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. And again, that's something that I really love with Takahata's work, is that he's able to add humanity to characters like so. Again, like it seems almost like effortlessly.
Oh, yeah.
And there's just these little touches where it's like, yeah, like she is like the aunt is being cruel to them, but there's still little moments where you can be like, okay, like, she's living in this time of war. She's had this propaganda all around her. She's this mindset of like, we're trying to win this big war and it's not doing really well.
Yeah. And she is frustrated because she has these two people that she's trying to take care of, and they're not really doing anything to help out with that. And it's like, yeah, that is frustrating, but also they're children. Like, what can they realistically do,
Exactly. And I think that, because what's interesting is that, because you have Seita, who, like, these teenagers, like, yeah, he could go work for, like work in the factories or things like that. But should he?
Yeah, should he?
Because, he's trying to take care of Setsuko. They've just lost their mother. He's like, that he's doing all that. And is that not valuable?
Right, exactly. Yeah, no, the whole mother dying thing. I actually really like how the movie handles that, because I don't know, I just really love the image of him like finding his mother in this hospital, and she's like the most bandaged up individual. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but there's like a scene where like he's like with his mother, and she's like the one person who's wrapped up in bandages in the hospital that has like the most bandages covering her. And I feel like, I don't know, to me, I just interpreted that as like, oh, like, I don't know, just the fact that this main character, he's the one who's like, has like a person in that hospital who's just not moving and is just like having it the worst. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's like, again, it's this great use of the visual language, because he's going through the hospital. He's like, other people, like, they're really injured, things are looking bad. And then he finds his mother, and she's just, and I'll have this image, like, because I remember the first time I watched this show, just have this image, like, impressed on my mind forever. Just, he's like, oh, and then you see her just like this full body cast, like the bandages are dirty, and just like, oh my God.
Yeah, and you can hear her breathing, how she's just like, and you're just like, oh God, it's not human. It's like, but that's, again, like, that's just showing you just how brutal it can get. Like, the movie's not afraid to show that, which is commendable. Like, I'm glad that a movie is able to show that. Another scene that's kind of tied to that scene, can we talk about the scene afterwards when, Saita talks to Setsuko, where like he doesn't exactly reveal to her that the mother's dead, but he's still like telling her like, oh, you can't see mom right now, like she's busy, or she's like at the hospital, we can't talk to her. And Setsuko is just kind of like, I remember you analyzed this in your video, you like, Setsuko is just like kind of standing there, like not even really understanding what to even do, because she has all these complex emotions just running through her at the time. And Saita, in his, older brother ways, is just like, hey, watch this, look at me, like, spin around on this pole thing. And like the music is kind of happy at that point, but my point is, I'm just trying to set up the scene. What I really love about that shot is that Setsuko doesn't look at him and doesn't react to what he's doing, and yet he's still going ahead with like trying to entertain her. You know?
Yeah, it's this very, again, I'm just gonna say this like a dozen more times through this podcast, so please bear with me. But Isao Takahata was a goddamn genius.
Yeah.
Because just like that scene, just it has so much tragedy, and it's like because it's both an expression of the sibling love that they have, like Seita wanting to do what he can to protect her, even though, again, he's a kid. There's only so much he can do. And it's just like, so seeing this expression in a way where it's not just like, oh, I'm going to hug you close and everything. Cause that's like, that's kind of like the obvious thing to do. But this very unique scene, which actually is taken again directly from the short story. And just seeing it brought to life in this way that's so, because it feels minimalist, there's like so much is being expressed with so few words.
Yeah.
And just that's cinema right there. That is cinema right there.
Exactly. Yeah, I like how you said that. Like, it's a very unique kind of shot and scene, and a very unique way of dealing with information that was just told to the characters. I think, yeah, exactly. If it was just like, let me hug you, and like, let's, and the characters are like saying what they're feeling, it's like, why? Like, that's the easy way out. Like, give me something unique. Give me something I can remember. Again, we're talking about the scene. Like, I remember that really impacted me, the way that was presented to me.
Yeah, it's just so much of this movie, and because you go through this movie and every little bit feels exactly measured out for the exact effect that they're going for.
Can I just say, while I was watching your video, I think there was one part where you had mentioned, because I want to talk about this. This is something that's like I've definitely thought about with the film, and that is that it's fucking miserable. Now, of course, obviously, it's a very miserable film. Because I remember you made a point to talk about there are scenes of joy, and like they do show the characters kind of like actually enjoying life with each other. Like, there's that part at the beach where they go to the beach. There's that part where when they first find the abandoned bomb shelter and they like set up camp there, like things are kind of looking on the up. Like, it's not that the whole movie is just straight up miserable for the entire duration. Like, there are moments of happiness. And I thought that was interesting because the way I see it, I'm miserable the whole movie. Like, I don't think I ever felt any joy throughout the film. And I think it's because of that opening, how it does, show that they kind of don't make it out in the end, which I'm glad they show that at the beginning. They like are straight up like, neither of these characters make it out, like straight up. And I prefer that. Like, and I think it's a great way to really set up that, like, even though there are scenes of joy, they don't last,
Exactly. And I think that is such an important ingredient in this film, because when you have a movie that's just straight misery all the time, it's one note, it's there, and ironically, I feel like then it comes across as not as strong or even downright like parody style.
Yeah, well,
it's
so
it's like imagine if you had, for example, Star Wars, but there was no joy in it and no color. It's like, could you imagine if they made a movie like that? Rebel Moon. Oh, who said that? Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, but you're absolutely right. I think what it is that it's up to interpretation. Like, I think what the movie portrays, like, the movie obviously has moments of joy and moments of misery, but I, as an audience member, I'm able to interpret it that I myself am miserable the whole time because I know what's happening. I know what's going on. I know what's going to happen. But I'm still enjoying what I'm watching. Like, I still think it does these things very, very well, so that even though I'm miserable, even when they're at the beach and they're like, nothing miserable is happening at the beach. They're just like, aha, we're playing at the beach. We're playing in the water. It's like, and the whole time I'm just like, ugh, this sucks. this is so sad, like, but like, I'm glad that I can feel that way because I myself feel like I can feel that way and I'm not doing anything wrong,
Yeah. And I feel like, definitely, I think that is, really good effect to have there because obviously, because, while the characters are feeling joy all the time, we know because of the opening, like, oh, this, like you said, this isn't going to last. And you're kind of like, because I think it's at the beach, you start to see like a couple little splotches on Setsuko's back.
You see the splotches. That is the scene at the beach where they find the dead body. So that happens. Yeah, but even like scenes like when they find the Fireflies and they like have like they're like in the bomb shelter and they release the Fireflies and like it's a very striking image having all these Fireflies everywhere. Like it looks nice visually. And then it hard cuts to like the next morning and she's burying all the Fireflies into that grave. And that's when she's just like, I'm putting them in a grave because that's where mommy is. And he's like, oh, now you know the truth. And it's like, oh, shit. But like, yeah, like I think that's what makes I think that's why I know I can't feel joy during those scenes is because immediately after each scene of joy, there's that dead body on the beach. There's her burying the dead Fireflies that didn't last very long. And when she reveals that she knows the truth about the mother, like each scene of joy is followed up by this punch in the gut,
Exactly. There's those dark clouds are always looming there at the edges. And over the course of the story, they come closer and closer. And again, what's coming. And I feel like having those characters feel those moments of joy while we, the audience, know that it's going to end in tragedy makes the tragedy feel all the harder.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. Yes. You definitely need those moments of joy because then you're just like, all right, I'm just watching like torture porn at this point. It's just like these characters aren't human, because it's just like if they were just straight up feeling misery the whole time, you're just like, why am I watching this? Like these aren't real characters. They're just tortured for the sake of like, for the sake of the story. That's not fun. That's not interesting. That's not anything. That's just misery.
Rebel Moon. Oh, who said that again? Who keeps saying that?
Who keeps saying that? Oh, get out of here, Zack Snyder. No, but you know what? I think another thing you had mentioned was that I really found interesting was the whole death of Setsuko. Because like I feel like that's one of the big reasons why people give this like such praise. Like when I was scrolling through Letterboxd and I see all these reviews say like, "Oh, the child died. This is so sad. It made me cry." I will admit I did not cry when she died, but I still felt the emotions that were appropriate for that scene. Because I feel like, and you mentioned this, how like, just because a child dies in a movie doesn't automatically mean it's automatically sad. There was like this one clip you showed where like a little girl gets shot. Where was that from exactly? Do you know?
That was from Crash. That was from 2005 movie Crash.
Okay, yeah, I've never seen it. But like I think you made a very good point in that because like that is something that I've definitely thought about with this film. And with film in general, I'd say like this whole idea that because a movie makes you cry, that automatically makes it good, because I've never really subscribed to that. Mostly because I don't often cry at movies because I know they're films. So it's important for when I actually watch a film and I'm told like, oh, you will cry while watching this movie. It's like, okay, will I? But I feel like this is one of those movies where even though I didn't cry, I think it does handle its subject matter of, with all that it's dealing with very, very well. And I do feel like the way it handles I have to keep looking because I keep forgetting their name. Setsuko's death, I think they handle it very well, especially, the line, what was it? She didn't wake up or she didn't breathe again.
It's like she never woke up.
Yeah, she never woke up. And that's handled so well. So well.
Yeah, because in my video, I kind of layered on like the segment of the story over the scene, but in the movie, as like, because you get that line, no, she never woke up. There's a moment of silence, and then we hear like this howling wind, there's a storm outside, and we just see several shots of Seta holding her body against him. Just no words. It's just the howling wind, you know, the dark color palette of the scenes again. Like I'm like, here's the thing, is like I cry very easily. Like I'm not ashamed to say it. Like, you know, right. I'm a grown man. I will cry in movies, and like I'm choking up already just thinking about this. Or it's just like,
yeah,
you know, he's just holding her, and again, just the way that it's told without any dialogue, just like that, the emotional, again, like the howling that it's going through him, you feel that, you sense that, and it's soul crushing. And then the ending, and here's the thing what's interesting with that ending, the musical cue for that is actually the same as the musical cue when Seta's trying to distract her, like, hey, look what I can do. Like, that's the same music cue in both scenes.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, it's I believe, and don't quote me on this, because there's precious little information about the soundtrack online. But my research has its limits, unfortunately.
No, but I think the every little bit of details that you're giving is definitely helping, though. I think that it's still valuable.
Yeah. And I think the title for that particular cue, that song, is Futari, which translates to two people.
Okay.
Because like it plays at near the beginning, where it shows, like, you know, their bond and how, you know, he's trying to hold on, you know, help her out even in this dark moment. And then it plays when he cremates her body. And just, again, just like the way that this, I had to kind of trim this down a bit for the video, but just, God, the way that the scene unfolds, again, it's like there's no words. It's just like he puts, like, you know, he's has her in like the little like casket, and he's putting the things around her, like her toys, and he has like the little fruit drop tin, and then he like second guesses himself. He takes it out, and then he takes the lid, and then before he puts it on, he looks at her, and it's like the music feels like it's crying itself. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's the emotions are still felt in that scene, and I think that's very, very important. Like, as you said, that we would keep on saying this, Takahata, what a master. Like, that's important, because it's just, if like if things like that, like in this scene, were not presented like that, I feel like I wouldn't be able to appreciate it. Like, I need that silence. I need the music to like kind of tell the story. I need the visuals to tell the story. I don't need characters talking the whole time. You know, it just makes it all the more, it makes it all the more interpretable. Like, I'm able to figure it out as an audience member.
Exactly. Just like, again, the visuals and the music put in there is like, it creates this very powerful synthesis of elements,
and it also doesn't feel what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't feel I guess, for lack of a better term, forced. Like, you know, because again, like we were saying with the whole like children dying thing, like, oh, that automatically makes it sad. It's like, no, it's sad because we knew this character. It's sad because, obviously it's sad on principle. Any child dying at a very young age, that's sad on principle. But the movie earns that sadness because, you know, we know this character, and the way that the movie kind of portrays how the other characters take her death, like, that's what makes it actually sad, you know?
Yes. And I just feel like the movie does a good job of really describing the tragedy of it, because when it comes down to it's Seta, because obviously, you know, Seta, you know, took Setsuko away from their aunt because he couldn't take that abuse anymore. But at the same time, like, he was not able to, he did not have the ability to save them, even though, like, in a way, there's like a certain hubris that was in him as well. Like this whole time where he's like, oh, things are going to be okay. Dad's going to come back once we win the war. Like he still has this bravado in him that keeps him from realizing, okay, maybe this isn't working out. Maybe we just need to do what we can to survive. And it's like his desire to try to help her, to protect her, outran his ability to actually do so. And he didn't realize that until it was too late.
Right, exactly.
And
I do like the idea that we never do see the father character. We never do get a set in stone confirmation that he died, like he never really plays a huge part in the movie. And I do kind of like that because we don't need to know, like what is established is enough for us to kind of interpret it our own way, where it's like, okay, he never had a chance,
Yeah, it's and I like that too, because like it's he wasn't a prominent character like in the short story, and in the real life story even, like that's actually kind of a changed detail, because but I like that in this movie. It kind of adds this extra little layer of uncertainty, because again, with the war being over, it gives this additional sense like things are in such disarray. Losing a war kind of does that.
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer,
it's like it kind of puts things a little out of whack. But yeah, it's like it just adds that extra little sense of like, oh, things have really gone to shit.
Yes, very much so. And there is, I like how there's that uncertainty, because not everything needs answers. We don't know. Like it is what it is. We can't explain away we can't explain away everything to make us feel better. Like sometimes there is that uncertainty that just remains there. Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, they set up the father character and then they didn't pay it off. Wow, what an objectively bad movie. Dang.
Boy, I sure hope somebody got fired for that blunder.
Oh god. but yeah, it's just like, it's again, like every little detail in the movie just feels precisely placed. The things that it changes from the short story, the things that it keeps, are all very deliberate.
Yeah, I like how you were explaining. Well, there is that one, like we had said earlier, the scene where he's like trying to impress Setsuko. Like there is that change from the original short story. And yeah, I do like that, because I do like that scene. I like it better. I mean, I haven't read the short story in its entirety, but I think I do prefer the visual aspect that this movie kind of gives it that. There was also, I feel like, was there another scene you had like you had pointed out where like it was different from the short story?
I'm trying to think. There's I know like one of the big differences is that even though like while this movie still has some like it's the grisly details, it isn't as prominent as it is in the story, because in the story there's a lot of like very like gross kind of details. Okay. And again, that's like not Nosaka trying to deal with this real life thing that he went through. Trying to think like specific scene that where you see this change. But I think it's just like it's those little details that had been kind of not exactly cleaned up, but it's like Takahata took the story, this very personal story, and he emphasized the love between Seita and Setsuko, mirrors Nosaka and Keiko. Like he tried to almost like in an indirect way saying like, it's all right. You shouldn't have to worry about this anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because again, they're children. Like there's only so much that they can do. And a lot of what they had to do was out of their control anyway. Not many people have control when it comes to horrific situations like this. Like, how could you?
you know, and again, like it, because it's a situation that has so many different layers. In my video, I talk about David Stahl, who wrote about this movie, and he uses this really interesting framing device called circles of responsibility, which is spelled like response hyphen ability. That talks like, you know, you have like the community around Seda and Setsuko, and then you have the nation, which was waging this aggressive imperialist war. You know, not to mention like all of the crazy bad shit that Japan did, but that's a whole can of worms I won't open right now. Yeah. And then you have the international sphere, which was again like the American firebombing of the cities, which was a bad thing. And like and they have, again, it's like all these different little layers. So it's like you can't really point to one guilty party within this story, within the real life story.
Well, yeah, again, it's like we were saying with the Ant character. Like, you can't really consider her a villain. You can consider her an antagonistic force, but definitely not a straight-up villain. And I do appreciate that the movie is mature enough to understand that. That, you know, because like I feel like if they made like the Ant like a straight-up villain character, it's like, oh, that is so Hollywood and so phony. And it's like, I'm okay with phoniness when it's like, you know, a fake fictional story, but like, you know, this is very much a movie that's supposed to be more rooted in reality. So like, you know, making that character, like making her a little more villainous would just seem ridiculous, and oh god, it would just take me out so hard, you know? Like, you definitely need that. You definitely need something a lot more grounded. And if that means, you know, not making a character who you hate not seem so villainous, you know, that's reality, I'm afraid. You know what I'm trying to say? Am I making sense?
Yeah. And I think what's really great is that the final note that we leave her on, Seda has like packed up like a little, like all of their things, like we're leaving. And the Ant's reaction is kind of like surprise. And you kind of see there's like that hint of like regret in her eyes. She's like, oh, like see, she's like genuinely concerned.
Yeah. But and she does. What I love about that is she doesn't go like, oh, what have I done? She doesn't have a moment where she goes, what have I done? It is very much visual. So then you as an audience member can interpret, is she actually concerned, or is she like guilty for the sake of the children, or guilty for her for own selfish reasons, you know?
Exactly. It's like this great, like the expressions that you have here, just animated flawlessly. It's almost like Isao Takahata's a good director or something.
Wild accusation there. Yeah, no, totally. Absolutely. Actually, I mean, this is sort of on the topic of like, you know, animation with this film. I really want to talk about the hard candy and like how it keeps coming back. One specific shot that I remember really connecting with me when I first watched the movie, and then when I watched it again, I was like, oh yeah, it's still just as good, is when it's like you could probably argue it as like a nothing shot where like all Seita's doing is just, you know, pouring the candy outside of the tin, and you see like little specks of candy also fall out of the tin. And for some reason that just really impressed me when I first watched this movie, because like, I don't know, like seeing that in animated form was huge, because it's like such a tiny thing you don't often think about, but that I feel like we've all been there, like little snurds of candy like coming out of a tin or something, just, I don't know, little snurds of like hard candy like just popping out. Like for some reason seeing that in animated form, like seeing that in animation was just, it was surreal. Like it was amazing, because like, again, it's a little moment that up until then I didn't really think about, but then seeing it, I'm like, no, I've experienced that. You know?
Yeah, it's like you can feel like the little like crumbs, like the dust on your hand. Yes. And my video kind of glossed over this, but Isao Takahata actually really focused in on those hard candies, because that was something that was very heavily rationed during the war. And so whenever kids like they could get hard candies, they would like that was a big deal. That was and so adding those little details again just gives like a little extra weight, like the tactile feeling of it. Like you can connect with it even more.
Yeah, exactly.
Now we've been kind of like talking about like the themes of this movie, and there's actually the recent kind of like global hit with the new Godzilla movie, Godzilla -1.
Yeah.
When I saw it, that actually really ties in super well, I think, with Grave of the Fireflies.
I think so too. Yeah. Well, it's actually funny how like a couple of movies from last year actually do tie in with like, I mean, not directly, but like, they have similar things to them. There was Oppenheimer, there was Boy and the Heron, but yeah, I think Godzilla -1 out of all of those definitely connects with Grave of the Fireflies more, which is funny because Boy and the Heron was also Ghibli, but
yes.
But no, I think because Boy and the Heron was definitely more about the fantasy world that character went to, whereas like, the whole Japan and World War II was just kind of the era it takes place in. It's just kind of the backdrop, like where to place you at. But no, I feel like you're absolutely right, though. -1 definitely deals with very similar themes when it comes to wartime Japan and how affected they were, like on a smaller scale.
Yeah, it's because it go from like the whole mindset of like, oh, you have to sacrifice your life to win this war that we're not even going to win anyways. When the main character, like he comes home and they're like, everyone knew he was a kamikaze pilot. He came home and people are like, why are you alive? It's your fault we lost this, which they come to realize is a ridiculous thing to claim. And that moment, the moment movie where they're like, we have taken life, for granted, we are always like, oh, we have to sacrifice ourselves. We need to reevaluate how we approach things. And that's such like especially a bold statement, because when it comes down to like in Japan, hasn't really been that kind of like national reckoning with the war. It's like, because you look at Germany, there's this very much this idea of like, oh my God, we really did terrible things. We need to make sure we don't do that again. And nowadays, like they're very much like they're like a heart of liberal democratic republicanism now. And they're very much like, yes, these terrible things happened. We're going to teach our children, the next generations, that these things were terrible and awful. That we take responsibility for them and we won't do them again. In Japan, that's still controversial. There's still, and again, not to like, we don't want to paint it in a monolith, of course, because there are people who are like, hey, what we did was really messed up. We need to make things right. But there are also folks who are saying, no, we did things like, like we were trying to act against imperialism. We didn't do anything that bad.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And
so
I think
it is a touchy subject, but no, you're absolutely right. Like, yeah.
And I think like having these movies like Grave of the Fireflies, like Godzilla -1 are really encouraging to see, because it's like, there's still this drive towards trying to grapple with that past and try to make things right. And it's like, again, like speaking from a more Western perspective, like I'm not going to be like, oh, these are the things that have to happen to make things right. Like I am not smart enough to prescribe that.
No, me neither.
No, it's like I'm not going to again to like say any specifics, but I think just like the desire to try to make things right, I think is really good to see.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I feel like what -1 does really well. I mean, -1 is just really good because as someone who's seen a bunch of Godzilla films, it's just nice to finally watch one where I'm just as enveloped with the human characters than I am the Godzilla action. Like the Godzilla action is freaking top notch, but the fact that we have these characters to connect with is huge to me. Like rarely ever see that. Again, I haven't seen every single Godzilla film. I am by no means a Godzilla expert, but of the ones I have seen, the human characters are not the ones I gravitate to the most. So it was just nice seeing in -1 for sure.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, because like beyond like the themes and everything, it was just a good freaking movie. Like,
yeah, I think when it comes to, and I think when it comes to, you know, comparing these two movies, you know, I'm not trying to, but at the same time, I think it is important to understand. Like, I think what -1 does, I do appreciate it more so than I do Grave of the Fireflies, because there is that whole Godzilla aspect where, like, you know, because I do feel joy when I watch -1. It is horribly depressing at times, but I do feel that joy where, again, like I said, even when there's joyful moments in Grave of the Fireflies, I'm just miserable the whole time. So when it comes to like movies I probably would watch over and over again, I'm choosing -1 because, yeah, I know, controversial take there. I'd rather watch a Godzilla movie than a horribly depressing Grave of the Fireflies. But, you know, like, I feel like that's an important thing for me to really understand when it comes to the films I love and appreciate. Like, I can appreciate what Grave of the Fireflies does so much, but I do need that, you know, reason to keep coming back. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, and it's very, yeah, and like, and obviously because, you know, Godzilla -1 is very much, you know, a movie that, like, you know, it has that triumph at the ending, you know, it's like, you know, and like I actually audibly cheered in the theater at the ending. Like I was so into that too. Like, it was great.
Yeah.
But yeah, like with Grave of the Fireflies, I like being able to talk about it just because I feel like so much of the conversation online, I feel sadly it kind of begins and ends with it's sad.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely noticed that.
And I wanted to kind of get in and be like, well, you know, what does it really have to say beyond that? Like, how does it get like incisive? How does, you know, again, the personal aspect of it, you know, carry through? Like, how does that add new layers of meaning onto things? Because, you know, because like sometimes, you know, like, again, like I said, I like kind of digging into movies and seeing like, oh, how they were made or like where they came from. But with some movies, it's just like, oh, some executive on Warner Brothers decided we needed a new Superman movie to keep the rights, and so they made Man of Steel.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of how it works sometimes. Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, and again, like I was saying before, it's like just because somebody says a movie is sad, you know, that doesn't automatically convince me that I'm going to like it. Like, I need to connect with the characters. I need to understand what they're doing. I need to make sure the movie is actually good, and it's not just doing sad things to make me cry. It's doing these sad things to tell a good story. And I feel like this movie, it's definitely not my favorite movie that I consider sad, but I definitely feel like it falls into the camp of actually succeeds in what it's doing.
Yeah.
And you go ahead.
I was just gonna say because to kind of like to bolster your point of like, oh, movie making you cry doesn't automatically make it good. Because like when I saw The Lion King 2019 in theaters and I did like the whole Mufasa death scene, it made me remember the original Mufasa death scene from 1994, and it got a little misty-eyed, and it's like, no, you're not gonna cry in this atrocity of a movie.
Oh yeah, no, that's a very good point. Yeah, when I saw The Lion King 2019, I'm just like, hey, the Mufasa death scene, oh, this is so sad, because I'm remembering in my brain the original Mufasa death scene, but like as I'm watching this, and I'm like, huh, when I'm looking at it as is, I feel nothing. Almost like it's not a good film.
Exactly. You know, it's like, so yes, I got misty-eyed in that movie. That does not mean that movie is good or even okay.
Right. Or even, at least they tried. No, that movie's atrocious. Oh boy. But yeah, no, I'm glad you agree with me on that. Yeah. And again, I feel like this movie definitely achieves that whole, it definitely deserves to be, even though I don't agree with people being like, oh, this movie made me cry, I think it does earn that phrase, in that people, if people cry during it, it definitely earns that. Just because a movie has that phrase thrust upon it does not necessarily mean it's true. For everybody, right. I should say.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, obviously people will respond in different ways to different things.
Sure, absolutely.
But I think what's important is that, and he kind of clarified this, is like you could feel the emotions, you could still feel like the empathy for the characters. And I think that's what's most important, it's like, it's,
and I do.
Yeah. And I think that's, I think it did what it was looking for then.
Yeah, exactly. I still relate to these characters. I understand all these characters and the plight that they're going through. Like, there's that scene where he goes to the doctor to see what's wrong with Setsuko, and the doctor's just kind of rock-faced about it. He's just like writing this, like, this girl just needs food, and Saita frustratingly is just like, where am I supposed to get the food? And the doctor just doesn't seem like he cares. But how many patients did that doctor look at just that day before he got to Saita and Setsuko? Like,
right.
It's not easy for anybody at that time. So you understand every character, and I like that about this movie.
Yeah, it's like, because and the movie does a really good job of kind of like showing through that kind of like that, again, not even like necessarily like, cruel, but just like kind of like that cold, hard, kind of like neglect, like there's nothing I can do. Because it really shows how, like, at this point in the war, like there was so much being taken for the war effort that so little was left for, people to use. Because they had, Japan wasn't, it wasn't like, like fascist or communist, but they kind of call it, like, I've seen referred to as like the Japanese statism. That's kind of like this more generalized term for it, where is like the whole economy is still mobilized for the sake of fighting this, again, an offensive imperialist war. And because I was like, well, the resources, we got to put them got to keep throwing them into this hole now. That's, because at the point that the movie is taking place, and the point that when Nosaka, Akiyuki Nosaka and Keiko, when they were suffering, the higher ups in the Japanese nation, they already knew that they were going to surrender. They already knew the war was lost. Their only point of disagreement was, do we surrender now, or do we wait to maybe get terms?
Right.
It's like, so they already knew that there's no point, really not that much point in trying to fight, but they still kept pushing people. They kept squeezing the people. And to see that exemplified in these little details, like you said, like, the doctor, you see like over the course of the movie, like, oh, this land has like this nice grassy field. Now it's like, it's growing food. Huh. So it's like those little things you can kind of see the desperation that's been creeping in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're absolutely right when you said like this movie's very cold, not so much cruel. I think cold is a very very good way of describing it. Contrary to what the title says, even though it has fire in the title, this is a very cold movie.
Oh no. Again, the movie does a great job of like showing, again, like the bits of the social environment that kids would notice, that they would feel the impacts of, without doing like, I don't know, like some kind of text crawl is like, the year is 1945, yada yada yada. Totally random tangent, but you want to know something actually kind of funny?
I'm always looking to find out funny stuff. Please tell me.
So when I saw this movie for the first time, I watched it with a really good friend of mine, Zach, and we did a double feature. Actually, we watched this, and we followed up with My Neighbor Totoro, which we were like, oh, that's like a happy movie, so kind of time together.
Yeah.
And the first funny thing about this is that we totally by coincidence, I swear we did not look this up. This is actually how those movies released.
Really?
They originally released in a double feature with each other, where it was Grave of the Fireflies followed by My Neighbor Totoro.
You know what? That does... You know what? That makes sense, though, because I was thinking about it. I'm like, huh, wasn't My Neighbor Totoro 88 same year as this? And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, okay, yeah. Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, in a way that makes sense, because you watch Grave of the Fireflies, you're horribly depressed, and then you watch My Neighbor Totoro, which is a movie that literally has no conflict in it.
Yeah.
Like, I think the one conflict is that the mother's in the hospital, and at one point they're like, oh, we don't know if she'll get better. And then like 5 minutes later, it's like, oh, your mother's better. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. And let me tell you, like, that's actually the second funny thing, because we're watching, so we've just had our hearts eviscerated, right?
Right.
And you know how we were talking before about like the Seda seeing his mother in the hospital like that?
Right, yeah, covered in the bandages.
And so we started watching Totoro, and they're like, oh, our mother's in the hospital. We're both like, no, not again, not again.
Meanwhile, she looks just as healthy as the other characters. She's just laying in the bed. She's just like, yeah, I'm in the hospital. It's like, okay.
Like, oh god, yeah. It's like, so we were just like, we got terrified for a moment there. We're like, oh god, it's gonna happen again.
Mother in the hospital, that can't be good. Oh, nothing happened. Okay.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, but yeah, no. That's interesting though. That you double featured that. Then it was actually a double feature itself. But again, yeah, no, that totally makes sense. You totally want to follow up My Neighbor Totoro from something like Grave of the Fireflies.
Yeah,
I got to rewatch My Neighbor Totoro. I remember really liking it when I first watched it.
It's so delightful. It's like, yeah, my favorite Miyazaki movie is still, I'd say, Kiki's Delivery Service. That's the one that's like speaks to me most personally. But obviously, obviously all of his movies are great. Hot take: Hayao Miyazaki is a good director.
Yeah. Imagine that. Yeah, no, I'm very much a Spirited Away person.
Yes. But
yeah, no, it's that's the thing with Ghibli is like they have a lot of great films. They're not perfect. They have their fair share of earwigs, but the good definitely outweighs the negative stuff. And it's thanks to movies like Grave of the Fireflies and other Ghibli films we've talked about on the podcast thus far. Yeah,
it's just whenever they make a new movie, it's like, yes, this is going to be. You're in for something interesting.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, even Earwig for it was interesting in its own way.
You know what? That's right. It was very interesting to see Ghibli make a fucking horrible film. I was like, wow, I've never seen that.
Oh my god. I feel so bad for Goro Miyazaki.
I know. Isn't that the worst to have? Well, I mean, it's probably pretty cool to have Hayao Miyazaki, one of the greatest animation directors of all time, be your father. But then it's like when you decide to become an animation director, it's like, well, how can you follow up Hayao fucking Miyazaki?
Right? It's just like,
look, I like From Up on Poppy Hill, but Earwig, and then Tales from Earthsea, like,
I know. It was,
Look, the important thing is Boy and the Heron was really good. So
yes, that was. I've actually seen that twice now, and just like, yeah, I'm still trying to figure it. Like maybe like 3 years from now, because I feel like that's the time it's going to take me to I don't know, figure it out. I guess.
Yeah,
I'll make a video about it, but
yeah, it's very much it's kind of a difficult movie to figure out. But from what I have seen, I do really like it. Yeah, I watched it. I've only seen it once. I watched it in Japanese. I have not seen the English dub with Robert Pattinson yet. At the time of us recording, maybe I'll see it at some point.
Yeah, it's like I haven't seen it in English either. But I would like to because I have to hear Robin Pattinson going Goblin mode. I have to.
Yeah. Only for Olivia's sake, but of course, just to see Robert Pattinson go Goblin mode. That is just something I have to see regardless.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that is something I actually do want to mention because I feel like I do bring this up every time we talk about a Ghibli film. I guess I should have started with it, but I guess we could still talk about it now. And that is, this time watching Grave of the Fireflies, I watched it in its original Japanese. Because the first time I had watched it, it was the English dub, and I don't remember really liking the English dub. Like, I loved everything else about it, but the English dub definitely annoyed me. And so that's something that, like, when it comes to Ghibli films, I feel like I appreciate them more when they're in their original Japanese. So watching Grave of the Fireflies in its original Japanese, I definitely feel like I think I lowered my score this time, but that's just because, you know, I feel like as I get older, my score is kind of lower because I'm able to kind of figure out what they actually mean. So I feel like, but I do feel like I appreciate the film more so, regardless of what, you know, number score I give it, you know?
Yeah, it's like, I mean, when it comes down to it, like, number score is like, there's a large amount of arbitrariness to that. You know, it's like, I mean, obviously, like, I feel like you can pretty easily say something like Norm of the North is worse than The Tale of the Princess Kaguya.
I'm afraid that's up for debate there, pal.
But, you know, once you get to, like, once you near one end of the spectrum, you're kind of like, oh, like, what, you know, it's, you know, there's a lot of room for, like, kind of those personal things. There's lots of movies that are, like, people hail as masterpieces that just don't click with me personally.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, you have things like Mars Attacks, which is criminally underrated, I dare say. But
yeah, no, definitely. But yeah, no, I do feel like, you know, when it comes to the whole sub versus dub thing, like, I don't argue. Like, I think because I'm very much a sub person. Like, I feel like when I started watching anime, I only wanted to watch the dubs because it's like, well, I speak English. I want to watch movies in English. But I feel like as I've gotten older, when it comes to films, I definitely want to experience them in their original languages because I feel like, you know, that's what they were made for. You know, these are the performances that the director wanted everybody to hear. So that's why I always try to go for subs. But I'm not going to judge people who go for the dubs. Like, you know, it is what it is. Like, you can't change how people perceive film. Like, it is, if that's how they want to watch it, that's how they want to watch it. So it's perfectly valid.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. It's like, because there's, honestly, for me, I kind of will enjoy a mix of both. Because, like, for, you know, when I was trying to do, like, a more, like, formal analysis of Grave of the Fireflies, I went for the subtitled version just because, like, that's, like, that was the original performance that the director got. And then, but sometimes I'll still enjoy the dubbed versions, like, especially if I'm watching something more for, like, entertainment. Like, for example, I will do, like, the dubbed version of, I like the dubbed version of Agretzko, that series on Netflix. I like the dubbed version of Beastars. Mostly I just like hearing Ben Diskin's voice. So,
of course. Yeah. Yeah, I think when it comes to dubs, I think the one I've definitely connected to the most, and that's just because it was the first one I ever experienced, was the dub of Death Note. Like, because that was my very first anime I ever watched, was Death Note. So watching it in its dubbed dubbed in English, it was kind of my introduction to anime as a whole. And I hold it very close to my heart in that regard. But then when it came to, like, my second anime, which was One Punch Man, I think the only reason I watched it in Japanese was because that was the only available one. Like, I don't think it was available in English for wherever I watched it. And so then I watched it in Japanese, and I still loved it because it was really freaking good. And then I think I saw a clip of the English dub one time, and I was like, ugh, I don't like these voices. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to stick to subtitles from now on. So, but yeah, no. And again, I feel like this movie, I definitely preferred it subbed. And especially, you know, after watching your video and how you went into detail about how it's a very personal story to the original writer, I feel like I definitely need it in that Japanese language because it's such a personal story that, like, you know, I need it in its original language for that.
Yeah, I was just like, I feel like also it can kind of come down to, if something's like more fantastical, I think, like, you know, the dub, like a dub might fit better for me, but if something is supposed to, like, more more, I guess they say, for lack of the better term, like more realistic, you know, like with
More
Grave of the
grounded.
Fireflies is much more grounded.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when it comes to like live action stuff, like I can't bear any live action dubs. Like, no.
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 No. Oh god. I remember seeing just a clip of that Squid Game dub,
no.
and I'm just like, why would you dub that? That's so stupid. Like, I watched it and it's when Squid Game was at the top of the world, I watched it subtitled. I'm just like, no, I'm not doing. I didn't even know there was a dub. I was just like, yeah, I'm just gonna watch this Japanese show. What was it? Korean?
Yeah, Korean show.
It was a Korean show. Sorry. Yeah, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna watch this Korean show and subtitled. And then I found out later, it's like people are just like, yeah, I watched it dubbed. I'm like, what? Why?
Oh no!
And then I saw a clip, and I'm like, oh, how could you enjoy this?
It's funny because like with the dub, it's like, again, like no shade to like any voice actors or anything, but you kind of tell from the dub that they didn't realize Squid Game is going to be as big as it was.
You're absolutely right, though. Yeah, no, you're right. Not to be mean, but I mean, it's like kind of.
Like, you gotta work and everything, but I have a feeling that they're probably just like, oh, this is just going to be another one of these series that comes out every week. But
yeah. But yeah, no, I think when it comes to the whole, I like bringing up this whole sub versus dub thing whenever we talk about a Ghibli film, because I feel like that is crucial to my enjoyment with Ghibli films. It's like, because the very first time I watched like Spirited Away, which was my first Ghibli film, again, I watched it in English, and I really did not appreciate it the way I did when I finally watched it in Japanese. Like it like clicked for me. So it's just something that I feel like with this movie, again, like I said, the first time I watched this movie was in English, whereas now I watched it in Japanese. I have a much greater appreciation for the film, and I feel like my thoughts on it are definitely a lot more set in stone now. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Of course, it's the endless debate, debate.
Yeah, and endless, very much so.
Yeah. And my answer is just sometimes one, sometimes the other.
Yeah, I get that. Well, can I talk a little bit about this Blu-ray? Unless you had something else you wanted to talk about with this film. Into the Blu-ray discussion.
Yes. Share this Blu-ray.
Well, so this Blu-ray. So originally we were going to talk about Only Yesterday and Grave of the Fireflies, because I only had Only Yesterday on Blu-ray and I didn't have Grave of the Fireflies. But it's good that we just made it about Grave of the Fireflies, because again, we had a lot to say about it. But also because I was very much keen on getting this on Blu-ray, because again, the first time I watched it, I could not find it subbed anywhere streaming. And so I was like, all right, I need the Blu-ray so then I can have the option, because, they have to have it. They have to have an option for it on Blu-ray. And I found this Blu-ray, and so here's another thing that I have to mention. I don't think there's a G Kids release of this movie, is there? Because like Ghibli has a bunch of like G Kids releases of their movies, especially on like nice steelbooks. I don't think Grave of the Fireflies is included in that, right? Because it's technically not a full-on Ghibli production. Am I correct in that?
I believe so. I believe that this had a different distributor than the others, and I think that they still hold the rights.
Right. So it's not a G Kids Blu-ray. It's a Sentai Blu-ray, and it looked nice, and it did give me the option to have like the audio be in Japanese. So I was very appreciative of that. I guess I do have to mention this. So when I put on the Blu-ray for the very first time, I was expecting maybe like a commercial here or there. It's like, whatever, like they play trailers on Blu-rays. We've had this discussion on this podcast before where we talk about like some movies feel like they're too good to be distributed with like, usual schlock being advertised at the beginning of it. I remember me and my buddy John, we talked about the movie Drive and like how I have that on like this nice steelbook, but then on the disc they have like a bunch of these Sony trailers for like movies that I don't even remember existing, but they came out around the same time as Drive, so they kind of advertised with them, and let me tell you, they are not on the same level as Drive. So anyway, I was kind of expecting that, but what I got was nothing I was ever expecting, and that was I got this weird commercial. I'll play it here in the episode.
Go to theanimenetwork.com and get hours and hours and hours of free anime. The new online anime player only at theanimenetwork.com. Come on, baby!
You have to understand, I was flabbergasted by this because it was advertising an anime website, not a specific anime movie, like maybe a Ghibli film, maybe some other anime film. No, an anime website it was advertising. And not only that, it was obnoxiously advertising it, because it was like this guy going like, hey, you big baby, you want to see anime? Go to whatthefuck.com. You can get like all these dubs and subs and glorious HD. And I'm just like, I was like, what is this? What? Like, I was flabbergasted. Like, I think I sent you the video, right?
Yeah. Over 400 hours of anime.
Yeah. I was like, what the fuck?
Did this Blu-ray get made in 2005 or something?
Well, that's what I was wondering. It was so like old school anime, like this is like old school. Like, this is not how you advertise people to watch anime in modern day. Like, it was old school. Like that's what made it so interesting. Oh, okay. I think this Blu-ray is from like 2012. So that makes a little more sense. Yeah, I'm like that because I see like copyright 2012 at the bottom. Okay, so that makes a little more sense.
That makes sense. That was like the bacon late epic.
Yeah. Narwhals and unicorns, the epic random internet humor.
Oh,
yeah, no,
God.
totally. Yeah. Oh, what an era.
Oh no! Oh, you're taking me back. Oh God.
Yeah. No, let me not only was that the fact that it just flabbergasted me, because it's just a fucking wild ad to have, but it's a fucking wild ad to have before a movie like Grave of the Fireflies. Like, it is one of the most tonally inappropriate commercials I've ever seen before a movie. Like I've said, I've complained about movies having these schlocky trailers before really good films. Like, that's normal. This was like a whole other ballpark. I was like, this is so inappropriate tone wise, because it's like this. Yeah, like we're saying, like, epic bacon, anime.com, like, come on, you babies, it's in glorious HD. And then it goes right to fucking Grave of the Fireflies. It's like, on September 12th, 1945, that's when I died. And I'm like, oh
no.
Really nailed the tone there, Sentai.
Oh, God, yeah. I wonder if that site's even up.
I don't know. I should have looked that up. But yeah, no, it was really funny. And you know what? It's convinced me to keep this Blu-ray, because that is the funniest goddamn thing in the world. I love cringe like that. That shit, I just think is the most hilarious shit. It is so tonally inappropriate. I have to keep this Blu-ray purely because of that. I can always skip the commercial, like whenever I put on Grave of the Fireflies, if I ever want to watch it again. Because, again, I get the movie in this nice quality Blu-ray. I get the option for the English dub or the Japanese dub. Like, I'm always going to go for the Japanese version, but I have that choice for the English version.
Right.
So, even if I don't like another version, I would rather have the choice. Like, I like having choice when it comes to films on Blu-ray like this.
Exactly,
I'm actually curious, like, do you have a bit of a physical media collection? Do you have this movie physically?
I don't have this movie physically, but I do have a good number of discs. Actually, I can actually turn around my chair here and look at them.
Mm-hmm.
I have a few. I have I have a few obscure ones on here. Like, there's this 2019 movie called Parasite. I don't think you've heard of it.
No, never heard of it. What is that?
It's just some Korean movie that won like a couple awards or something. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
I do have Spirited Away physically.
Me too. Yeah, I have the Steelbook.
I have Iron Giant. I have a couple of I guess I call like the holy trinity of Del Toro's movies: Pan's Labyrinth, Devil's Backbone, and The Shape of Water.
Cool.
Yeah, those are all 10 out of 10 movies. There's this one animated one called Bird Boy, which is if you get a chance to look that up, that's Bird Boy: The Forgotten Children. This is actually gifts for me from Reynard. He sometimes appears in my movies. We do a podcast together as well. And this is a wild ride.
Yeah.
You want to see an animated movie that like goes that's not for kids, like Bird Boy: The Forgotten Children. Check it out.
Nice. Well, so do you have plans to ever own Grave of the Fireflies physically?
I think I would, because like
well,
you said,
I highly recommend the Sentai Blu-ray.
All right, I gotta get, it's this great piece of art on a hard disk, and also Grave of the Fireflies after that.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I feel like, over the past decade, we've seen like, streaming services, which has made it more easy than ever to watch movies, which is a great thing in itself. But at the same time, we are also starting to see the limitations of that, where...
Oh, yes.
Because copyright and like distribution rights are this big, giant, tangled mess. And it's really kind of been thrown into relief with how many people have to say, oh, which service can I see this movie on? What do I have to subscribe to watch this movie? And and you have things like Vudu, which are more like digital storefronts, but even then you don't always get full options. Like, I don't think you can get the dubbed version of Grave of the Fireflies there. I mean, the subbed version of Grave of the Fireflies there anymore.
Yeah, no, that's so Vudu. I use Vudu a lot. Yeah, no, I think that's where I originally saw Grave of the Fireflies, and yeah, no, I did not get the option for its original Japanese on there, which was frustrating. So yeah, no, it definitely like, if there's one thing this podcast is about, I mean, it's about many things, but it is very much to spread the word on the importance of physical media. Just because, yeah, streaming's nice. I'm not one of those people. I do see the benefits of streaming, but as you said, in recent years, we've seen the not so great things that come with streaming. So it's definitely important to have, your favorite movies readily available. And I feel like a movie as important as Grave of the Fireflies, I definitely need physically. So, yeah, no, this is definitely joining the collection. It's remaining here. And if you ever do get convinced to buy the Sentai Blu-ray, I highly recommend it.
All right. Added to the collection. Woo!
Yeah, we did it. Well, Daniel, was there anything else you wanted to say about Grave of the Fireflies before we wrap up?
I mean, there's many other things that could be said, but I have said them in, a certain video with a certain link down in a certain description below. Right. There's a plug.
There's a plug. Well, I mean, we've already started the plugging. I might as well let you plug away more things. Please shout out other things. Where can people find you?
You can find me again here on YouTube, Daniel Goldhorn. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Letterboxd. I'm sometimes on Tumblr. And and also, if you go to my channel, you can kind of see videos I do there, talk about movies, trying to dig into them, as deeply as I can. And then I also do roughly bi-weekly podcast with, again, Reynard, and you can find the link there. It's a Goats and a Fox talk about movies. Find that link on my main channel. But yeah, I just Really appreciate being able to come on here and talk about this movie, which again, we I'm looking at the timestamp here. Oh my God. There's so much to dig into here. There's a very, again, just this great story. So much going on in this work of art.
Yeah.
And I just appreciate having this additional chance to speak about it.
Oh yeah, totally. And I really wanted to see this again just to really cement my feelings on it. So I'm glad we were able to do that. So yeah, dude, thanks for coming on today to talk about Grave of the Fireflies. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. It was a great time. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, great. So yeah, and thank you, the listener, for listening to today's episode. If you want to support the show, give a like, give a comment, listen to us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or on YouTube, that's fine too, doesn't matter. But we'll see you guys next time. So bye everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.